Hi, I'm Kevin with Springfield Leather,
And I'm Rusty.
and we kind of felt that we had a need to address some issues that our customers have and some questions about Veg Tan leather. We've done one of these before. I didn't feel it was maybe as well done as it could have been, so we'd like to take another shot at it. You know, Veg Tan leather is an interesting medium, and in the leather world, it's used a lot. It's used a lot for gun leather, knife sheaths, belts, many other products, as you probably are aware. And there's a host of various products to buy. I mean, from us here at Springfield Leather, you can buy Hermann Oak leather, you can buy various import leathers, even other domestic leathers. So it's understandable that some people sometimes get a little confused as to how to go about making a purchase of vegetable tan leather. First of all, if you happen to be purchasing vegetable tan leather on our website, it's sold by the square foot, which means if you order one, you're going to get 1 square foot. If you order 6, you'll get 6 square feet. Now, that being said, if you order 6, you're going to get a piece of leather that has a total area of 6 square feet in it. It won't be a perfect rectangle. We might cut a perfect rectangle for you, but it'll be expensive because we have to deal with all the waste. So, now, Veg Tan leather. I've got a roll of Hermann Oak leather here in front of me. The reason that Springfield Leather sells that is basically because I like it. I've been tooling leather for a long time. I like the way it tools, and a lot of other people in the leather world like the way that it tools. There are other leathers that you can use. They're fine if you like them. If you've got an issue and it's not broke, then don't fix it, would be my advice. If you want to tool a really good piece of leather, Hermann Oak is hard to beat. Rusty, if you had to say something about the difference between Hermann Oak and our import leathers, what are some of the things you would say?
Well, for one thing, since you mentioned tooling, the consistency that it accepts water, the toolability and the consistency from piece to piece. But you know, one thing that I really like about it is the way that it molds and the way that it accepts dye. And it is even and it's consistent from piece to piece. And even each piece of leather has its own characteristics, but for the most part, in a Hermann Oak situation, they all came out of the same pit. They were all treated the exact same way, and you're going to get a nice product each time.
Let's talk about that for a minute, because when you're talking about vegetable tanned leather, you're talking about a cowhide that's been tanned with vegetable matter. Now, it used to be, in the old days, in the United States, you would have been talking about oak bark that was ground up and used in the tanning. But today, that's not practical anymore. There's just not enough oak bark able to be harvested to where the tanners can use that. It's not that they couldn't use some, but most tanneries use mimosa or quebracho, and there's some other agents as well that they can put into the tanning solution and make this vegetable tanned leather. Now, vegetable tanned leather is leather that's been tanned so that it will accept water. The fibers are structured so that the water can penetrate, and it leaves it open to what Rusty talked about: tooling, dyeing, finishing, oiling, things such as that. One of the things about a domestic vegetable tanned leather, and especially about the Hermann Oak, is it has a little bit darker color. This piece of leather is a piece of imported vegetable tanned leather. It's quite nice. You can probably see the main color difference. It's just very, very white and very clean looking, very nice. When imported leather is tanned, they can cover up a multitude of sins with the type of tanning agent that gives them that very white appearance. They can cover up a lot of issues. Now they show up later, but they're able to cover them up. With leathers that are tanned in the United States, those issues are not as easily able to be covered up. Now Rusty talked about veg tan leather being tanned in the same pit. And what we mean by that is when Hermann Oak, for instance, gets 100 hides, just for picking a number's sake, they drop all those hides, and this is shortening everything considerably, into a tanning pit. One pit. They have lots of pits. Each pit gets X number of hides dipped in it. Hermann Oak does not know what they're going to have until the hides come out of the pit and they grade them.
Which is not uncommon for any tanner.
No, it's the way they all work. If it's a veg tan leather, they have no idea what they have until the leather comes out of the tanning pit. At that point, they look at them and they grade them. One thing we've noticed is that many people, excuse me,
We'll take that out.
many people are not aware of the way that leather is graded. They think that a D grade leather is lesser quality than an A grade leather. Is that true?
It is not true. Those hides came off of cows that walked in the field side by side. They were into the same processing plant. They went through the same tanning pit. They went through the same process, and at the end of the day, then they got a grade.
Okay, so this hide here has a hole, and it has some grain damage up here in this particular area. Now, the rest of this hide looks pretty darn good. So, for conversation's sake, let's just say somebody wanted 1 square foot of A grade leather. Well, it's right here. It's just right underneath that hole down here, and there it is. It's a perfect piece of leather, or at least pretty darn close to perfect, and it comes out of a D grade piece of leather. So the grading is nothing more than cosmetic issues for the most part. You'll find cosmetic issues such as grain irregularities. You may find issues on the back side of the leather, such as thin spots or cuts or something like that. But again, in domestic leather, those aren't common issues. Usually another issue with domestic leathers is that American hides, American cattle, are allowed to live longer, so the hides get bigger. Now in some countries, such as Mexico, they kill the cows earlier. You'll have smaller hides.
Something else that you find a lot of times in the difference in a Mexican hide and a domestic hide too is normally in this country you don't have so much of a free range setup. So the cows are actually inside of a fencing of some sort, whereas in Mexico or other countries you may have more free range, which can lend to more brands so that they can mark their cattle, and it also can lend to more scratches and marks and bug bites that the cow has gone through during its life.
Right. Now, going back to domestic vegetable tan leather, the people at Hermann Oak, and I don't mean to be blowing their horn here, although I'm okay with doing that, they have figured out how to come up with a consistent vegetable tan leather that acts the same all the time. Now, in the leather world, especially the tanning world, I don't care what tanner you are, you're going to produce a hide or two every now and then that's not up to standards. When you consider that a tannery might be producing 500 or 1,000 hides a day, something's got to go wrong somewhere. It just does. So when an old-time leather crafter would say something to the effect that, oh yeah, this one company makes leather, but it's got rawhide in it all the time. Well, that's not necessarily true. What happens is maybe a hide got rawhide in it once simply because in the tanning pit it was too close to another skin and the tannin was not allowed to penetrate like it should have. There's so many things that can happen. And that's the point. Things are going to happen in the leather world. Normally, if you take it up with the person that you bought it from, things are able to be fixed pretty easily. Now with the Hermann leather, what would you say the prime usage of Hermann Oak, some of the prime usages would be?
Between the belt making industry, the holster making industry, finished products and carving and tooling products would be things that they're utilized for regularly, day to day.
Yeah, saddles, things of that nature. Now, with the Hermann Oak leather, it is tanned in such a manner as to be a firm tooling leather, suitable for all those things. Suitable for molding, for oiling, staining, all of those things.
Something that happens in a tannery is they can be tumbled, and so for instance you can get a double shoulder that has a lot of slop to it or a loose hand. That's because it was tumbled in a pit, or I'm sorry, in a drum. And in that drum, those grains that he talked about, they can begin to break down and they soften up to where they move. The fibers, yes. And in a situation, for instance, like Hermann leather, it's dipped in a pit over and over. And so that keeps those fibers firm, and it allows them to stay that way all the way to the end, so that when you do carve them, tool them, stamp them, mold them, they're more rigid and they hold that shape much, much better.
Yes. Keep in mind, a tanner can make vegetable tan leather just about into anything he wants. He can make it into upholstery leather, he can make it into belt leather, he can make it into harness leather, saddle skirting, any number of things. And then he can make it any thickness that he wants. And you guys probably all know that. The Hermann leather is what it is, and it's meant to be that way. Now there are other domestic leathers that you can buy. In this country, there's primarily two vegetable tanners. Half the world uses Hermann Oak, the other half uses the other one. Both groups think the other is silly for making the choice that they do. Well, that's up to individuals. Vegetable tanned leather, people have a tendency to think of, oh, nice, clean, that's what they all want. And of course we do. We all want a nice, clean leather side. But remember, it's the method of tanning that produces the type of leather that you want. So if you're experimenting, if you've never used vegetable tanned leather very much, or if you're just starting to use it, feel free to email us, call us. We'll tell you the best that we can. Right up front, we'll tell you that we're a little bit biased toward our Hermann Oak leather, but there's a lot of other leathers you can use, and they'll do a fine job. Some of the European imported leathers are quite nice. I just don't happen to like them as much as I do the Hermann Oak leather, because I like a firm belt. I want something that's solid. If I'm going to make a holster, I want that thing to be rigid, not soft after 2 or 3 years of use. What else can I say?
I think you've covered it pretty well.
Okay. Plating is an issue. If you get a piece of leather that's shiny on the top, that means that it's been plated a little too hard. Import leathers are famous for that. They iron out those wrinkles with a giant iron and a ton of pressure, especially with double shoulders. That doesn't make it bad leather. It just means that it's leather that is what it is, and you have to take those things into account. If you get a double shoulder that's been plated and has a little bit of a shiny appearance to it, well, it'll still accept water, stamp, tool, and dye just fine, but you're going to have to be careful when you make a sharp fold, because otherwise you could crack the finish. If you apply a lot of dye to veg tan leather and then make a sharp fold, doesn't matter what kind of leather you use then, what could happen?
Well, and any veg tan leather that's had that done to it and you're going to fold it, it should be moistened before you do that, because it's going to crack. And it doesn't mean that the leather's bad. You put an alcohol dye on a vegetable tan leather and you've just taken more moisture out of it as the alcohol evaporated, it's going to crack.
Yeah, and you can put a heavy coat of finish on vegetable tan leather, let it dry, bend it, and the finish will crack. And it'll look like the grain of the leather has cracked too, and possibly it did, because the finish cracks, so does the top grain of the leather. Typically it really doesn't hurt anything, but people have a tendency to say, oh, leather's bad, cracked, and that's just not the case. It's not necessarily a case of bad leather at all. It's just a case of perhaps not knowing how to work with it as readily as you might.
Well, the other thing too is in that same vein, you know, each piece of leather has its own characteristics. And I explain it a lot of times this way. If you hold your arms out, they're on the same body, but every arm has scars that the other arm doesn't have. Every arm has characteristics that the other one doesn't. It's the same way with a piece of cow, you know, or a cow. One side has got scars, the other side doesn't have. The other thing is that there are more prime areas to cut things from depending on what you're wanting to do. One spot back here in the hind end of the cow will act this way, but down here in the armpit on the belly, it's going to act completely differently. And so taking into consideration that you're working with a natural product is a huge, huge benefit to you and ultimately to the people who are trying to help you.
That's true. So, all of that being said, what's the best value for the money? Well, that's gotten easier to figure out over the years. Pretty much veg tanned leather, if you compare apples to apples and oranges to oranges, the price of those leathers has leveled out because of the globalness of the world leather market today. You can some leathers are cheaper. They will be your import leathers. At least for the most part, they should be a little bit cheaper, especially the lighter weight ones. But as far as domestic leathers go, the price is going to be pretty close. You get into your heavyweights, the price is going to be pretty close. You can, you can buy leather by the side, which for the most part I don't like to do, because typically what happens is the side will be averaged at from 19 to 23 feet or whatever the average footage is. Well, when you get a 19 footer, you're losing money. When you get a 23 footer, it's happy days. It just doesn't work out that way all that often.
When you do that, your price per foot changes accordingly.
Drastically. So with leather being as expensive as it is, vegetable tan leather, it's good to, if at all possible, buy wisely. And we encourage people to do that, to ask us if they have questions, and we'll try and help. When leather is counted, the tanner counts every single little bitty square inch piece, every single one. He charges us for that. Typically here, if somebody orders 7 square feet of leather, we're going to cut 7 square feet off of this hide. Very rarely, if we cut up a side, do we end up selling the amount of leather that the side was measured at. Very rarely. If this side is 23.5 square feet, normally I end up selling about 22 square feet, because we actually give away a little bit with each piece that we cut. We don't do it intentionally, but we'd rather err on the side of the customer than short someone. And I'm not saying that shorting doesn't ever happen, but we do get questions from people from time to time. They'll say, Kevin, I ordered 10 square feet of leather and there's just not 10 square feet here. And we'll take it back if we have to, and we'll remeasure it. Well, there is 10 square feet of leather there. But some folks think that just because this little bit over here didn't fit somewhere, that they shouldn't be charged for that. But that's not the way it works. So we try to measure really, really close. And that's one of the good things we say about Springfield Leather. We are willing to sell you a smaller piece of leather so that you don't have to buy a side.
The other good thing about Springfield Leather is that we're always looking ahead. And so we have been on the lookout for square cows. And when we find them, we'll be the first to let you know.
Now, I saw one back in the 70s once. I think it was related to some mescaline that I was... something like that. But that was a long time ago, and I haven't seen any since, so I don't anticipate that there would ever be enough of them. to get square?
It's probably not going to happen.
Probably not. What are we missing, Rusty?
Well, I think it's a good thing that we've taken out the time to do this, because the challenges come with this too is there just aren't a bunch of people that are willing to cut leather and sell it. And so it's a give and take situation. Springfield Leather wants to give where we can, but at the same time, ultimately in a good relationship, it's a give and take from both directions. And so if you want 7 feet, it's probably not going to be cut off of the square end of the cow, because we've still got to do something with the rest of it.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up, Rusty, because while we are willing to cut the leather for you, I can recall a number of orders that say, I'd like 6 square feet of leather. I want it to be 1 foot wide and 6 feet long. Well, that's true. That's 6 square feet. But a person would only want to pay the square foot price. That means we would be cutting 6 feet off the back of the cow, the best part of the leather, and then selling it to somebody for the square foot price and leaving ourselves with a belly.
And the next person that wants 6 square feet is going to continue to get into different spots of the leather in order to accommodate. So we really try hard to break a balance and find an even. And especially if you end up ordering 6 square feet and it comes off of the neck with the shoulder, that's really when you might find out that you got more than 6 square feet of leather, but we're only charged for the 6, because we're trying to make sure that you can still do your project. The other thing that people probably don't take into consideration too, or haven't really given any thought to, is if we get an order, say we get a internet order, and that internet order comes in and it's got acrylic resin on it, and it's got black dye on it, and it's got 8 square feet of leather on it, and then some 1.5-inch buckles. What are we making?
Well, it would seem like belts maybe.
And so when we look at each order, we try and consider what the product that's trying to be accomplished is, and that's where we may give a phone call and say,
8 square feet of leather is not enough to make
it
belts.
just isn't going to get it, because I can't cut the leather out the way that you're going to need it. And so we try to communicate, and sometimes maybe we do fine, and sometimes maybe we make a little bit of a mistake, but at the same time, we're really trying hard to do what we can to help.
Yeah, and it's true, this is a bit of a plug for Springfield Leather, but it's also part of our effort to educate our customers and make their life a little bit easier. Because we've always figured that if we help our customers, then they will help us. And that's what we want, to make you successful. And we try to do that really and truly. Done?
Done.
Bye.
Bye.